How does it feel that I replaced you, Sarah?
I actually feel really, really excited about what you all are going to do with this podcast, and I am happy to pass the baton, Rachel.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Run fast, run hard.
All right, we're going to go. Thank you.
Welcome to the Emerge Collaborative podcast. I'm Falon.
And I'm Rachel.
Together, we share more than 2 decades of experience working with young adults on college campuses.
So on this podcast, we're engaging the questions we hear in our ministry to better equip those who care for the emerging adults in their lives. Well, we are excited and honored to be with Dr. Sara Barton. She has been working in ministry in higher education for over 20 years. She has experience as a missionary, as a preacher, in Christian publishing. She has a doctorate of ministry and is particularly passionate about the spiritual formation of emerging adults. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you for having me.
So to kick it off, let's just start with what everyone's wondering. Like, what does deconstruction actually mean?
You know, I am really looking forward to this conversation today, and thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast. And one of the things I just want to start off by saying is when we talk about deconstruction, I think people are not monolithic. Everybody comes to this topic and has questions about this, all from different kinds of perspectives. And so for some people, this is just an energizing topic. For some people, this is a little awkward. For some, it's a little concerning. And, you know, I also think just as like a little disclaimer as we get going, some people might be wondering about spiritual and religious trauma. And I just want to say from the get-go that, you know, if people are experiencing spiritual and religious trauma, they should talk to someone, talk to a therapist, talk to a pastor or a mentor who believes that it's a real experience and a real thing. So I believe that there's healing for that. But today we're going to talk about deconstruction. And so I just wanted to get a little bit of that out of the way as I get started on what it actually means. You know, Falon, we talked in our first season, we talked with several people who talked to us about spiritual struggle and these kinds of topics. And I think that spiritual struggle just is as old as humans. I think if we look at it like probably Adam and Eve had spiritual, I think we can see it even there. Adam and Eve seem to struggle spiritually. Everybody has, all humans have, all these characters in the Bible, we can see that there's this experience of what it's like. It is just really hard to be in a relationship with a being who's invisible.
Mm. Yes.
It's not, it is not an easy experience. So you see characters in the Bible, I think especially of the psalmists who talk about being in the pit. They talk about things like the light has gone out of my eyes. They talk about just like reaching for God and they can't find God. And, you know, they have a Christian history. They talk about the dark night of the soul. And so I think that whenever we talk about deconstruction, it fits in this category of spiritual struggle. But I think that this experience of deconstruction, and I'm just going to define it a little bit as the process of re-examining and questioning your religious beliefs. There are a lot of definitions out there, but that's just kind of how I want to refer to it. Re-examining and questioning your religious beliefs. It's a very simple, short way of thinking about it. So, you know, we could get into all of the things like philosophically. I think it goes back to Derrida, a French thinker who talked about deconstruction. And what he wanted to do was to dismantle claims to truth. And he really connected the experience of deconstruction to power. And he went as far as to say that all claims to truth are in the end claims to power. And so when we talk about faith deconstruction today, we're not talking exactly about the same as what he talked about. But there is a questioning of truth. And I think what we're hearing and seeing as people talk about faith deconstruction is it involves questioning power. And so I think a lot of people in the church today are talking about that intersection of truth and power. And they're re-examining and questioning truth, and they're questioning power in the church and other Christian institutions. So this is inevitably an uncomfortable conversation because a lot of people are experiencing this, and it just seems, I would guess you all see this too, it's just on the rise across all social media platforms. I saw the stat that the number of articles about deconstruction doubled in 2024.
Wow.
So
huge.
Those who keep up with those things notice that. And a 2022 HarperCollins survey of book readers, U.S. adult book readers, said that 1 in 4 United States adult book readers have changed their spiritual or religious beliefs in the last 2 years.
Wow.
So while that's a long way of saying, while spiritual struggle has always been around, there is just a sharp rise in this questioning of your beliefs. And that's where I think we're getting at what deconstruction is and kind of what it means.
Yeah, that's so good. Re-examining and questioning, like you said, it's complicated because there's truth and there's power, and those are really big questions. And it also seems like it's really essential to spiritual life to examine and question, wrestle. Why is it that so many people are so intimidated by the idea of deconstruction, sometimes even hostile to it or like really afraid of it? In some cases, even demonize it. What's going on there?
Yeah, I've just heard it called sinful. I've heard
Yeah.
it called from the devil. I've heard it called all kinds of things. So, yeah, I think that a lot of people just want church to be more positive. They want Christians to be more positive and for our experience of things to be just, great. And, it's true that lots of religions try to help people find peace and joy and connectivity and belonging. I mean, those are real reasons why we, especially we can say Christians are a part of what they're a part of to begin with, is because we hope to find joy and peace and belonging and meaning and purpose and all of these positive things. So I think when there's a critique of something that has provided all of those good things in a person's life, it's intimidating to hear people criticize or critique or question. It's uncomfortable to face it. And people would just rather we all get along and find the good things. Why do we have to focus on the difficult things? So I just want you to think for a minute about the public critique regarding Christianity in the last few years alone.
Yeah.
So just a couple things. The Church Too movement, which came out of the Me Too movement, is not that many years ago. And so that was a critique of Christianity when it comes to the treatment of women in the church, and especially how hierarchy and patriarchy relate to sexual abuse. So that is I think in the back of people's minds who are deconstructing. Think about not so many years ago, the racial reckoning in the United States around George Floyd's murder, and about how Asian Americans were treated during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think some in the church wanted to avoid discussing those hard situations in the church because they were controversial, but there is a lot of rethinking. There is a lot of questioning around issues of race and around justice. And I would imagine that many people listening to this podcast can name pastors who left the church during that time, churches that closed during that time, churches that broke up during that time because they couldn't get along over masks or over how to deal with some of these racial things. So those are just a couple, but I mean, think about just the number of documentaries and movies and books that have come out in recent years.
Yeah.
Mark Driscoll and the rise, what was it called? The
Rise
and Fall of Mars Hill.
Yeah.
You know that one, which was, really a critique of or a story that told about spiritual and religious trauma and helped people see how that was happening. Or The Secrets of Hillsong that really criticize celebrity and how there's this stage and there's all of these beautiful things happening, but members are getting hurt behind the scenes. Shiny Happy People, which was a documentary that really looked at hard questions about parenting and abuses that take place within the Christian community, like abuse of children. That really brought out a lot of those things. So, you know, you hear all that and you can see why people are questioning and re-examining their beliefs, but it's intimidating. And it's scary to face all of that. And it's certainly not positive to talk about all of that kind of stuff. And it's a critique of leadership. So that people can be saying, where's the joy in that? Or where's the peace in that? Or where's the purpose in that? Let's just talk about positive things. So I think that's pretty intimidating to a lot of people to face all that hard stuff going on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, even listening to you talk about this, like, it gives me compassion for those that are in the middle of deconstruction and how intimidating that feels and questioning those things and taking in those kinds of, you know, documentaries, and it's facing a reality that's hard. But it also, I think, gives me compassion for those that feel intimidated on the other side, that are like, why are we bringing this into church? Because I can see how that feels really shaky, and it feels like, oh, if we look at this, then what is the rest going to fall apart? And this is the safe space, or this feels comfortable and I want it to stay that way. So that was a helpful framing.
It's kind of like, what is it called? What's the saying? Like putting our dirty laundry out for everyone to see.
Right. Yeah.
Why are we telling these stories that either hurt Christian witness or embarrass the church? Or that's not everybody. That's just some people. So what about all the good stories? I mean, I can see, I think that, Rachel, you're right. Like, there has to be compassion going both ways at a time like this.
It's hard when it's like a story you've built your whole life around, or when you think that God's judgment or God's character is wrapped up in some of those questions. That's really challenging for everyone. And so I do empathize as well.
Yeah. I'm wondering, when we talk about deconstruction, I really appreciate you mentioning the ways that things that have happened in the last 5 to 10 years have come into play with deconstruction and the power piece and all of that. What about just pure doubt? Like having questions about beliefs or ideas about God or things you've been taught. Like, are deconstruction and doubt the same thing, or are they distinct? And like, how does doubt kind of play into this conversation?
Yeah, in my own experience, or what I hear people talk about, I would wonder if doubt and deconstruction are just sort of holy cousins or sacred cousins, or they're related somehow, but maybe they're not, they're not twins, maybe, but they're related, and they're not exactly the same thing. So, I think it's Kierkegaard who said that to have faith is to have doubt. And so I think that whenever life faces inevitable ups and downs, the highs and the lows, the things that just are going to happen in life that you cannot predict, then doubt comes in to your faith. When you've said, I'm going to, like, if you're a Christian, I'm going to follow Jesus, I will never look back. And then you face hard things in life, then I think doubts come in. I think doubts have always come in. Biblical characters have doubted. I can't think of any who seem to not have doubts. But I don't know if you all think this, but it just seems like deconstruction kind of goes to a next level when you wonder not just about the ups and downs of life or that, but it's like questioning the whole system you've been taught.
Yeah.
And so, there's so many movements, especially parts of American Christianity, that have such an emphasis on certainty that it just seems like with deconstruction, when you pull out a thread, it's like just the whole thing unravels. And that's different from doubt. It does seem like that there's something about the whole system being questioned. I'm thinking of a student right now that I was really close to. I remain close to, even though he's not a student anymore. And he had been taught growing up that the Bible is infallible and inerrant, and you cannot question. And he just knew to open it up and look at Bible verses and to not bring any questions to it. And he began to learn when he got into college how the biblical texts came from a very different culture. They weren't just like plopped down and were written in different languages and thousands of years ago. And he wanted to make sense of how the Bible is true, but not in this literal way. And so, a literal 7-day creation or a literal hell, or why do the Gospels have different details, when it comes to even the way that the 4 different Gospel writers told the same story sometimes? How do biblical genres function? How is poetry different from history, different from, apocalyptic and because of all that certainty about the Bible that he had been given, he was not just doubting. It was not like the experience of, like wondering about one piece. It was kind of everything unraveling for a while. He was re-examining everything. And so he was re-examining the people who taught him those things. I feel like I did help him think through some of those things. And we did some of that hard work of understanding ancient contexts and culture and all of that. And he really wanted to do that work. But it was a roller coaster, and it took quite a bit of time. And his parents were concerned, and he felt lost. But, he did get through that deconstruction, examining of everything experience. And he has a faith now, but it looks very different than it did before.
Yeah. I think for me, like when I think about being in the classroom with students from like a Bible professor side of things, even just when a student would sometimes ask a question and I would say, well, I'm actually not sure, but here are a couple of different views. That in itself could be enough to start the deconstruction process, because they hadn't had anybody in a type of authority position say, I don't know, or I haven't landed on that, or I'm not certain. And so that feels really similar to what you're saying of like the piece of him being taught the Bible just like fell from the sky. Here it is. Don't question it. Like the moment you start to shift that thinking, then you're suddenly wading into this in a way that, like you said, you pull the one thread and everything starts to.
Yeah, and of course you never meant to send someone down a difficult path by saying, because you said that, but sometimes you can't even predict what it is.
Right.
That's going to send someone down that path. It's just, and it might be about inerrancy, and it might be about a lot of different things. But I think that when you start looking at the whole system, deconstruction is like looking at all of your beliefs.
Yeah. As pastors and parents are caring for young adults who oftentimes, because of their stage of faith and where they are in their stage of life, are often the people who experience deconstruction, though people of any age and stage, of course, can experience deconstruction sometimes multiple times in their lives. Should they be intimidated? And if not, what are some healthy responses that parents and pastors can have for young adults who are experiencing deconstruction?
Yeah, so should the pastors and parents be worried about it? Should they be?
Is it time to panic?
Is it time? Is it time to panic? Last year I read a book called Invisible Jesus by Scott McKnight and Tommy Priesen. And I would encourage any parent or pastor to read that book if they haven't read it already, because it's a book about deconstruction. But in that book, they talk about why. Why do emerging adults report that they are deconstructing? And I learned quite a bit from that book. So these are some of the ones. So they say they want collaborative approaches to ministry. They expect to be included in decision making and in participation in ministries in the church. And they are suspicious when they're not. And so that is causing some deconstruction. And when I heard that, I thought, I think that there is a lot emerging adults really understand about each other, and they understand about technology, and they understand about the world that some of their pastors and parents just are missing out on. I mean, that's always been true, but it seems especially true, and like it's happening really fast right now. So they want to be included in solutions and in collaboration. And they're deconstructing because they're not included. They just are kind of wringing their hands saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they're not being consulted.
Yeah.
And so that's one. They say that they want presence with people. They want people to be present with them, close to them, to know them, more than they want a big presentation. They're not interested in the lights and smoke, and they're not opposed to it necessarily, but that's not the main thing they want. They want to know people, and they're deconstructing because they're being given programs that have value presentation over presence. I mean, this is in their words. This is what they're saying. They're weary of culture wars and of Christianity that says you have to have an enemy in order to exist. And they don't want to be a part of Christianity that says, oh, we're against all of these people, or we're you have to be a Democrat, or you have to be a Republican, or you have to believe this, or you have to believe that, and everyone else is your enemy if you're a Christian. They don't want that. They report they're deconstructing because their churches are not really paying enough attention to mental health awareness. And they have no idea why the church is not up to speed on mental health when it is such a problem within. So I could go on with some of those reasons. So if pastors and parents are intimidated or worried or fearful of those realities that they're bringing up, then if they're afraid of those realities, I think maybe they should be afraid, because those are the realities. And if they don't know what to do about it, they ought to be, they maybe should be concerned. But if they're willing to hear and learn and see why young people are deconstructing, then I think a lot of those points that I just went through and a lot of the points in that book, those are good points. Like collaborative approaches are better. Presence does matter more than presentation. Mental health awareness does matter in the church. And so if you're willing to be taught another way, that's what I would say to parents and pastors is listen to what they're saying, look at your ministry approaches, hear what it's like from their perspective. It is different from when I was an emerging adult. It is different. So yeah, you shouldn't be so worried that you're not willing to face what it is that they're saying, which is why they're deconstructing. So it's nothing to be so fearful of and worried about if you'll just listen to young people and why they're saying they're deconstructing. Again, Falon, you said it. It's not only young people who are deconstructing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no need to be anxious, but there is a need to be responsive.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good. I should have said it like that about 5 minutes ago.
No, but I think it was helpful to hear all of the different examples of even just topics to be listening for, and because I think sometimes when we tell pastors and parents, listen, they're like, to what? And so I think it's actually helpful to hear all of those examples laid out.
I'll add one thing to that is that one thing I really wish parents and pastors fully recognized is that to deconstruct is faithfulness. It is not a lack of faithfulness. It is faithful. It's because you want to be authentic to your faith. You care about it so much that you're willing to face the hard questions.
Yeah.
And so that's the only thing I would add there is it is faithfulness. So talk to young people like, I appreciate how faithful you are. I appreciate how much you care about your faith. I admire how you're willing to take this so seriously instead of, oh no, what are we going to do? And a lot of fear.
The sky is falling.
Yeah, the sky is falling. I think it's faithful.
It's wanting to know God fuller and deeper. Like, that's so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah. What does it actually feel like to be in the midst of deconstruction? I'm thinking especially for pastors and parents who maybe haven't gone through it in quite the same way that like an emerging adult might. Like, what have you observed and maybe experienced?
Or for
even in your own
parents who are
life?
preparing to launch their kids to college, which is a place that students often experience deconstruction. How can they kind of prepare their kids for that? That's good.
Yeah, I think it does help to know and think what is it like. And I would say there is nothing easy about it. It is not easy and fun. Nobody is doing this because it's cool and because it's fun. That is not like, that is a myth.
Yes.
People do this because it's cool and fun. It is, if people report that, it is one of the hardest processes that they've ever gone through, that it is an existential crisis. And it's an identity crisis, and it's a faith crisis. Nobody signs up for that for fun. I mean, just think about what it's like when people begin asking these questions that they asked during deconstruction. They are putting themselves at risk of being rejected by their friends, by their family, by their church, by their grandparents. It can be a very isolating process, because lots of times your family, your closest friends, everybody may not be on the same path as you at the same time as you're doing this. So, there are consequences for authenticity. So it can just seem easier to fake it, and to fake it when you go home for Christmas, to fake it when you are around your friends, when you see your youth pastor from home. And, whether we want it to be this way or not, conformity is necessary for belonging a lot of the time. And so when you are not having conformity about some of these big things in your life, you're asking questions about a lot of beliefs that your family holds and your friends hold. You might be worried that they're going to say, well, then if you don't like it, go somewhere else. You're worried you're going to be rejected, and you're not even really sure exactly where you are yet. You haven't arrived when you're deconstructing. You're just thinking and asking and questioning. And so I think there's a big identity crisis going on, which is already a part of what it's like to be an emerging adult to begin with. So you add deconstruction to that. And I think it's a time of significant sadness and loss in some ways for people. People feel like they might be judged or shamed. And so I think that starting to understand that it's not just people being flippant. It's not people not taking their faith. It's not that they're not taking their faith seriously. To just kind of get into their shoes and to realize this is not an easy thing to ask these hard questions. So yeah, I think that it is not easy. It is not an easy experience.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. What would you say to specifically a young adult who is in the thick of deconstruction? Like, what's one thing you would say to them?
I would say I admire you for being faithful enough to ask the big questions. And I admire you for being authentic, for being real. And I'm here for you.
That's beautiful.
Perfect.
It's short, but there's just, and in that conversation, I would say, surround yourself with safe mentors. They have a sense of who's a safe mentor. Find somebody who's been through spiritual struggle of some kind. I would say all the things we tell people, as a chaplain, this is just what you tell people at all phases of grief and life and struggle, and is you tell them, move your body, eat the right foods, drink enough water. One of the biggest pieces of advice I've given students going through this is, you are not going to solve this immediately, because there is, with all of the information at our fingertips, there's a desire for many people to figure it out today, or tomorrow, or this week, or before next Sunday, or before the end of this semester. And they think information, podcasts, nothing against podcasts. They think podcasts will solve the problem. Or they think that reading a book will solve a problem. And just like, those are not bad parts of the process, but give yourself some time and don't obsess, I guess
Yeah.
is what I'm getting at, because you can become obsessive about figuring it out. And so I would just,
That's good,
after
yeah.
the affirmation, I would just give some of those kinds of pieces of advice. Cultivate silence in your life. We all need that more anyway, but what you can do is fill all that silence in your life with just listen
Podcasts.
with podcasts. Yeah.
James K. Smith does, he's not the only one who talks about this, but he talks about we're not just brains on sticks. And I think sometimes when we're going in through these kinds of spiritual struggles of all shades, including deconstruction, we want to think our way out of it. And transformation requires so much more than head knowledge. So I really appreciate that reminder, because in the thick of it, it can feel like it's an information issue when learning more things is only one dimension of how we navigate deconstruction and the reconstruction on the other side.
But that's the very approach to Christianity we've given young people.
Yeah.
We've said, oh, you just need to study and learn and fill yourself with facts. And I mean, much of the time. And so, yeah, we shouldn't do more of that at this point. Yeah, like a more holistic approach is a good idea.
Yeah. Well, and the smartest thing in the room is typically in everyone's pocket. So it's like, what do we do with the reality that we have all this information, but that can in itself become isolating. Yeah. So I appreciate the part of like finding a safe mentor, finding like people to be able to talk with, because a podcast or a book or looking up TikToks on deconstruction cannot replace that relational side of it that actually starts to pull you.
It's
through.
the same thing they've said they're critiquing is they want more presence.
Right.
Instead of presentation. So get in the room with a real person, be in a relationship, have a spiritual mentor, and talk with a real person. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you gave great advice for a young adult or emerging adult going through this. So let's talk about the parents. How would you advise a parent who is watching their teenager or young adult deconstruct?
Yeah, first of all, I would just say stop thinking you're a bad parent or a bad Christian. That's not what this is about. But I think as a parent, I just think that we worry all the time that we haven't done a good job, especially when it comes to faith, that if our children are doubting or not going to church, or we think we've done something wrong. And so I would just tell them, this is not because you're a failed parent or a failed Christian. I think there's a lot of shame that parents probably are internalizing. And so, there's just so much that we as parents have to let go of and let God be in control. And that's hard. I would also just tell them that, if their teenagers are still at home, that it's not that better music or a bigger church or more impressive, well-known speakers, that's not going to change. That's not going to change this. That is not the answer. It may have been the answer in the year 2000 to a lot of things. Not that I think it was the right answer, but it's how we approached a lot of things. And so that's in the memory of a lot of people my age or even just a bit younger. And, that's not going to change things. So I would say just listen more than you talk. And get out there and serve together, feed people together, do anti-racism work together, get involved in your community with your kids. I think that's one of the things that deconstructing Christians are calling for is let's do things together. So I think if parents did that, that could be a really good approach. Again, I think I said this already, but it's so important. I'll say it again. Don't act like your young person in your life who's deconstructing doesn't love God and isn't faithful, because that is just the ultimate gaslighting experience. Because people who deconstruct report having a great prayer life. They report that they study. They report that they are pursuing God passionately. So affirm that they care. Quit acting like they're going off the deep end. Yeah.
What does a relationship with God look like in the midst of deconstruction and on the other side of deconstruction?
Yeah, in the midst of deconstruction, I hear all kinds of things. I hear some people say that it is the closest they've ever felt to God, because they're shedding the inauthenticity that's been keeping them from being real with God and with other people. That is how I hear some people describe it. They're excited about their faith for maybe more than they've ever been. But I also hear that people feel lost. They don't know where to turn. They feel like maybe they can't pray. So I just think people are not monolithic. Everybody's experience is different. And so it does feel a little bit like a roller coaster. So one day might feel the best you've felt in a while, and the next week you might be feeling like you're in a valley. So I think, maybe that's not a very good answer, but I just think in the midst of deconstruction, there's just no easy answer to what it's like to be in the midst of that. But
no formula.
There's no formula. But on the other side, once you've kind of, whatever that means, to move through deconstruction and to reconstruct, I hear people talk about that. I don't really fully even understand exactly. I don't think anyone fully understands what that means exactly, reconstruction or reconstructing your faith. I guess we're all figuring some things out, so I'll be listening and reading about that. But I do see this with people who have gone through deconstruction and they have found newness in faith. I think that there is a lot of freedom. And people say that post-deconstruction, they have let go of being in control of things themselves, and they're letting God be in control, and that there's freedom in that. And, before, at least a lot of people go through deconstruction, they're often really worried about who's in and who's out. Who's in and who's out, and where do we draw the lines, and what are the boundaries, and even wondering, am I in or am I out, and what if I do this, am I out, or how do I stay in?
A lot of anxiety.
So much anxiety about that. So, I read this in the book Invisible Jesus, and it has just stayed with me. And it says, Tommy was writing this chapter, and he talked about how twice in John chapter 13, Jesus says, I am the gate. And sometimes it says, I am the door. I think after deconstruction, you can rest. Jesus is going to take care of the gate, and Jesus is going to take care of the door. And he's the one who will decide who's in and who's out. And Jesus is in control, and God is in control. So let's just let Jesus do that. Let's quit trying to do that ourselves. Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. I'm the resurrection and the life. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the light of the world. I am the gate. And so I think a lot of toxic leaders act like they're the gate. They act like they're in charge of the door.
Yes.
And they act like they're the good shepherd, and they're not.
Yeah.
Jesus is. So once you get on that other side of deconstruction, I think you find that freedom to just let Jesus be the gate. Let Jesus be the good shepherd. And you can feel more settled and less worried all the time, and less concerned about what if you get something wrong. And I think being on the other side of deconstruction, I hear a lot of people talk about the word being a mystic. You just grow as a mystic, and you grow to be a little bit more okay with
the mystery of
the mystery of things, and not having all the answers. And you grow in trust, and ironically, maybe this isn't what people think is happening, but you grow in faith. You grow in faith and in trust when you just let Jesus be that gate and let God be in control, and just do the best that you can to live that authentic life of faith.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today and for talking to us about a topic that's so important and so impactful for the lives and spiritualities of emerging adults, but also for their families as they navigate this really important season of their life. So your wisdom has been super, super helpful, and we're really grateful that you joined us. And thanks for passing on the baton to Rachel so willingly.
I'm handing the baton, and so excited for both of you. This is going to be a great season on Emerge.